So how does cell therapy work? Let's be aware that cell therapy is practiced every day all over the world. Blood transfusion and the transfusion of various other blood components such as RBC or red blood cell, white blood cells, blood platelets is actually a form of cell therapy where the acceptance has been uniformly widespread. Less commonly, implant of cells of the thymus have been utilized essentially without as much as a wink of an eye of the medical authorities. Cell therapy is actually an implantation by injection of cyanogenic or of animal origin, fetal or juvenile suspension of cells or tissue in physiological solution, and recently with advancement of technology and oral ingestion of freeze-dried placenta live cells. Right now, no one knows exactly how cell therapy works. Basically, cell therapy is transplanting an organ, but instead of actual transplanting of organ, you are transplanting the cell of an organ. Gets? The transplanted cells then somehow bring about revitalization of their corresponding organs. Again, we don't know how all that there is to know about the cell therapy, but we know that the implantation by injection or oral live cell has following advantages over conventional procedure of surgical transplant. One advantage is implantation of cells by injection brings about a rapid dispersion of the cell material all over the body. Second, cells that are injured due to lack of blood supply during the dispersion, which is very common. That's the reason of the death of cells after the organ transplant. Third, since the cells are injected in the form of suspension, a rapid incorporation into the metabolic process of the body occurs. Fourth, the organs that are impossible to transplant, such as the brain and some of the endocrine glands, are very difficult to transplant, such as kidney, heart, or liver, can be implanted in the form of cells very easily. Fetal tissues with their higher biological potencies are implanted in the recipient and used as various sites in the body. The recipient organism itself controls and carries out a selective incorporation of various fetal cells. Transplanting an entire organ is impractical for several reasons. Your immune system might reject any transplanted organ. And who is going to risk trading an old organ or a gland that is nonetheless functioning for a new one that might totally fail if the transplant doesn't work? Thus, organ transplant today are limited to hopeless situations only. If the body's immune system rejects entire transplanted organs, is there also the possibility that it will reject the individual cells? I can say very little. The fact is that the body usually accepts the individual cells injected during cell therapy. Again, we don't know exactly why. Perhaps this is so because cell therapy uses embryonic cells whose immunological makeup is still incomplete. Whatever the reason, we know that cells do somehow get by the body's immune system. But that's not all. Not only do they get into the body, they also go straight to the corresponding organs. Liver goes to the liver, spleen goes to the spleen, sex glands or sex gland cells goes to the sex glands, and so on. Scientific studies in which those granular substances were tagged with radioisotopes before injection have proved that the injected and ingested cells do find their way to the specific corresponding organ. So that brings us to the question, once the cells have found their way to the target organs or glands, do they have the power to do any good? The answer to that appears to be yes. Independent studies by cellular biologists have discovered that a single cell from a specific organ contains the information needed to rebuild the entire organ or gland. Scientists extracted kidney, skin, and liver cells from chick embryo. After processing them in much the same way the cell are processed for cell therapy, they were re-injected into the membrane of an egg. The cells develop into specific organs. Other independent research by scientists who were not cell therapists and who were not investigating cell therapy have arrived to many of the same conclusions used to explain cell therapy. First of all, they all established that embryonic cell has the fastest, greatest growth stimulating effect. This makes sense. Young living things always contain more life force than mature ones. Secondly, they have confirmed that the growth stimulating effect of live cell in definitely organ specific but not species specific. This means that the liver cells will only stimulate the growth of liver cells, but they will not do so no matter what animal cells they came from. Finally, it has been demonstrated that unwanted or unnecessary cells are rejected without doing harm to the body. Two major theories explain how cell brings about revitalization of ailing or aging organ. One theory says that the genetic information contained in the RNA and DNA of the old cells is defective because they either age or disease. Perhaps the old cells' genetic codes have developed gaps of incorrect bits of information. This cellular genetic misinformation causes the cell to reproduce inefficiently. The new cells do not look or function as well as they should. Among comes the fresh young cells with their fresh genetic information contained in their DNA and RNA. This theory says that the new cells carry the correct genetic message to the old cells. The new cells replace misinformation with the proper original genetic codes. The mistakes are corrected and the gaps filled. Once the correct information is in place, the organ begins to function correctly as it should, as if it were young as the donor cells. The second theory is simpler. It explains that the aging of the cell is much the same way. As we age, our cell gradually loses their ability to function precisely as they were intended. This theory, however, does not bother the genetic codes. It says that the mere presence of this fresh stimulated secretion that activates the aging or diseased cells to get back to the track and function properly. Immediate effect explained by Nihans would have been caused by hormones, not cellular regeneration. Doctors who use cell therapy have reported that atherosclerosis patients have benefited. In a study performed on laboratory rats, cell therapy increased the residual pliability of aorta tissue that when stretched, it returned to its original shape much faster. This is a characteristic of a young tissue. Experiments on connective tissue have shown that cell therapy can increase the strength and pliability of this important structural element of the body. The youth appearance of your skin is determined in the large part of the health of your connective tissue. But that's not all. How youthfully your joints, muscles, and body blood vessel function only depends on the condition of your connective tissue. Since the success of several cosmetic surgery operation depends upon the strength and elasticity of the skin, a course of cell therapy before rejuvenating surgery is a good idea for older patients whose skin has lost its elasticity. So let me give you a run through of 10 benefits of live cell therapy. 1. Finer skin texture and even tone complexion. Second, smoother, softer, and velvety skin. Third, lighten the appearance of freckles and pigmentation. Fourth, hydrating skin, erasing lines and wrinkles. Fifth, enhancing skin renewal process and reduce the appearance of scars. Sixth, regulate the natural sebum production and reduce open pores. Seventh, firming up of sagging bust in women. 8. Regenerated cells, tissue, and organs. 9th, boost in immunity. Lastly, but not the least, vast improvement of alertness and mental functions.